June 5, 1942. Sevastopol, Crimea. The earth shook. Soviet soldiers in Fort Maxim Gorky looked up from their breakfast. They had survived months of German bombardment, artillery shells, Luftwaffe bombs, naval guns from the Black Sea. Nothing prepared them for what came next. A sound like the sky ripping apart. 7 tons of steel screaming through the atmosphere at 2,200 feet per second. The shell hit the fort's concrete roof. 8 feet of reinforced concrete. The toughest fortification the Soviets had ever built. The shell punched through it like paper. The explosion came 3 seconds later. Deep underground. The entire fort complex shuddered. Dust erupted from every crack and crevice. 23 miles away, Gustav Krupp smiled. His company's creation had just fired its first shot in anger. The railway gun Schwerer Gustav. The Germans called it Dora, the largest artillery piece ever built. A monument to German engineering, a testament to industrial might, a weapon that would change siege warfare forever. Or so they thought. What the Germans didn't know yet was that they had just unveiled the world's most expensive mistake. A weapon that cost more than an aircraft carrier, required 500 men to operate, took weeks to assemble, could fire 10 shots per day, and accomplished less than a squadron of dive bombers costing a fraction of the price. This is the story of how Nazi Germany's obsession with bigger, heavier, and more impressive led to one of the war's most spectacular failures. A superweapon that looked terrifying on paper but proved useless in practice. The story began in 1935. Hitler had just thrown off the chains of the Versailles Treaty. Germany was rearming. The Führer had a problem. France's Maginot Line, a chain of fortresses running along the German border. Concrete bunkers buried deep underground. Artillery positions with 8-foot-thick walls. Gun emplacements that could withstand direct hits from any known weapon. Hitler summoned Krupp, the legendary arms manufacturer. "I need a gun that can destroy the Maginot Line," Hitler said. "Money is no object. Time is no object. Build me the biggest gun the world has ever seen." Krupp's engineers went to work. They calculated. They designed. They pushed every boundary of known metallurgy. What emerged from their drafting tables was insane. A gun so large it required its own railway tracks to move. So heavy it needed to be assembled on site. So powerful it could throw a 7-ton shell nearly 30 miles. The specifications were staggering. Total weight, 1,350 tons. As heavy as a destroyer. Barrel length, 106 feet. Longer than 3 city buses. Caliber, 800 millimeters. Nearly 3 feet wide. Shell weight, 10,600 pounds. Heavier than a small car. Muzzle velocity, 2,200 feet per second. Faster than most aircraft of the era. The gun required dual railway tracks for parallel rails to distribute its enormous weight. A crew of 500 men to operate, assemble, and guard it. 2 flak battalions for air defense. Its own power plant. Its own ammunition trains. Its own repair facilities. Construction began in 1937 at the Krupp factory in Essen. Took 3 years. The barrel alone required special forging techniques never attempted before. The breech mechanism was the size of a small house. The recoil system used technology borrowed from battleship turrets. The final cost was never officially disclosed. Estimates suggest 7 million Reichsmarks. In 1940, that could have bought 1,000 Panzer III tanks, or 2,000 aircraft, or equipped 20 infantry divisions. But Hitler didn't want 1,000 tanks. He wanted one gun, the biggest gun, because bigger meant better. Or so the Nazi propaganda machine proclaimed. In May 1942, Dora made its combat debut. Destination: Sevastopol, the Soviet fortress city in Crimea. German forces had been besieging it for months. Regular artillery couldn't crack the Soviet fortifications. The Luftwaffe had tried and failed. This was Dora's moment to shine. Getting the gun to Sevastopol was an epic nightmare. The weapon came in pieces. Hundreds of pieces. Each piece required special railway cars. The entire convoy stretched for 5 miles. Movement was painfully slow. 5 miles per hour maximum. Any faster and the tracks buckled under the weight. The gun required 5 weeks to assemble. 5 weeks of 500 men working around the clock. First, they laid special reinforced tracks. Then they assembled the base, the carriage, the mounting. The barrel came in sections that had to be lifted by special cranes. Each section aligned with micrometer precision. Any error and the gun would tear itself apart when fired. The assembly site needed a concrete foundation. Without it, the gun would sink into the ground from recoil. Camouflage netting had to hide it from Soviet aircraft. Anti-aircraft positions surrounded the gun in concentric rings. The security perimeter extended for miles. And all of this happened within range of Soviet artillery. Workers assembled the gun while shells exploded around them. Several were killed during construction. The Soviets knew something big was coming. They just didn't know how big. Finally, on June 5, 1942, Dora was ready. The crew loaded the first shell. It took 20 men and a special loading crane. The shell alone weighed more than 5 tons. The powder charge came in 6 separate bags. Each bag the size of a man. The firing process was elaborate. The gun commander checked calculations. Wind speed, air temperature, Earth's rotation, target coordinates. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake and the 7-ton shell would land miles off target. The order came. Fire. The explosion was apocalyptic. The blast wave knocked men off their feet 100 yards away. The muzzle flash could be seen for miles. The shell screamed into the sky. Up, reaching altitudes where the air was thin, then down, accelerating, building speed, until it hit Fort Maxim Gorky with the force of a small earthquake. The Germans cheered. Dora worked. The superweapon was real. Over the next month, Dora fired 48 shells at Sevastopol. Each shot was an engineering marvel. Each shot cost more than a luxury car. Each shot required careful calculation and preparation. The results were underwhelming. Yes, Dora destroyed Fort Maxim Gorky. It also damaged several other fortifications, created massive craters, terrified Soviet soldiers. But the gun's actual military impact was negligible. Here's why. First, the rate of fire was pathetic. 10 shots per day maximum, often less. Each shot required barrel cooling. The barrel got so hot it glowed. Fire too fast and the barrel would warp. A warped barrel meant the gun was useless. So crews waited and waited, while regular artillery fired hundreds of rounds per hour. Second, accuracy was a problem. The shell traveled nearly 30 miles. In that distance, wind, temperature, and a dozen other factors affected trajectory. The margin of error was measured in football fields. The gun could hit a fort, but hitting a specific bunker or gun position, nearly impossible. Third, the shells were expensive. Each high-explosive shell cost 5,000 Reichsmarks. Each concrete-piercing shell cost even more. For the cost of one Dora shell, Germany could build half a fighter aircraft, or 10 anti-tank guns, or equip a company of infantry. Fourth, the gun was vulnerable. Couldn't move during combat. Took days to pack up. If Soviet aircraft found it, the gun was a sitting duck. The anti-aircraft battalions provided some protection. But a determined air attack would have destroyed Dora easily. The Soviets never mounted such an attack. They didn't need to. The gun wasn't worth the effort. Fifth, and most damning, dive bombers were better. A single Stuka could carry a 1,000-kilogram bomb, drop it with reasonable accuracy, and fly away to rearm in minutes. A squadron of Stukas cost less than Dora, required fewer men to operate, could attack multiple targets in a day, and couldn't be destroyed by a single lucky artillery shell. General Erich von Manstein commanded the siege of Sevastopol. After the battle, he was asked about Dora's effectiveness. His response was diplomatic but clear. The gun was impressive. It boosted morale. It demonstrated German technical superiority. But from a purely military standpoint, conventional artillery and air power accomplished more for far less cost. In private, Manstein was blunt. He told his staff that Dora was Hitler's toy, a propaganda weapon, something to impress foreign diplomats and intimidate enemies, not a serious military tool. After Sevastopol, Dora saw limited action. It was sent to Leningrad, but the siege ended before it could fire. It was prepared for the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, but again it never fired. The logistics were too complicated, the military situation too fluid. By the time Dora could be set up, the battle had moved on. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed in on Germany, the Wehrmacht destroyed Dora. They couldn't let it fall into enemy hands. Engineers rigged it with explosives. The gun that took 3 years to build was blown apart in seconds. The sister gun, Heavy Gustav, met the same fate, destroyed by retreating German forces near Chemnitz. The barrels were cut up, the carriages demolished, the greatest artillery pieces ever built reduced to scrap metal. The numbers tell the story of futility. Dora fired fewer than 50 shots in combat. It destroyed perhaps a dozen fortifications. It killed maybe a few hundred enemy soldiers. For this, Germany spent 7 million Reichsmarks, used 1,350 tons of strategic steel, employed 500 men who could have served elsewhere, required thousands of tons of ammunition transported across Europe. Compare this to what else Germany could have bought. 7 million Reichsmarks in 1940 could have purchased 1,000 Panzer III tanks. Those tanks could have changed the Battle of Moscow. Or 2,000 aircraft. Those planes could have won the Battle of Britain. Or equipped 20 infantry divisions. Those men could have held Stalingrad. But Hitler wanted Dora. Because it was big. Because it was impressive. Because it fit his vision of German supremacy. The Nazis loved superweapons. The V-2 rocket. The Maus supertank. The Type XXI submarine. Each one technically impressive. Each one strategically useless. Each one consuming resources Germany couldn't spare. The Allies built weapons that worked. The P-51 Mustang. The T-34 tank. The Liberty ship. Not because they were the biggest or most impressive, but because they were effective, reliable, and could be mass-produced. Soviet artillery officer Vladimir Petrov saw Dora's handiwork at Sevastopol. After the war, he was asked what he thought of the Supergun. His answer was simple. It was terrifying the first time. After that, we learned to work around it. We moved at night. We built new positions. We adapted. The gun was powerful but slow. In modern warfare, slow means dead. American intelligence analyzed Dora after the war. Their report concluded, the weapon represents the peak of German artillery engineering. It also represents the fundamental misunderstanding of modern warfare that cost Germany the war. Resources poured into prestige weapons that provided minimal battlefield advantage. Dora stands as a monument to a simple truth. Bigger isn't always better. More impressive isn't always more effective. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that makes the biggest explosion. It's the one that can be where it's needed, when it's needed, doing what needs to be done. The Germans built the world's largest gun. It fired the world's largest shells. Could destroy the world's toughest fortifications. And it was utterly, completely, spectacularly useless. Because war isn't about having the biggest weapon. It's about having the right weapon. At the right place. At the right time. In sufficient numbers. Dora could fire 10 shots per day. American factories built 10 aircraft per hour. That's why the Allies won. Not because their weapons were more impressive, but because they had more of them. Better logistics, faster production, smarter resource allocation. Hitler's Supergun was a masterpiece of engineering, a triumph of metallurgy, a wonder of industrial capability, and a colossal waste of time, money, and resources that Germany desperately needed elsewhere. The gun that was supposed to change warfare changed nothing. Except perhaps the lesson it taught. In war, as in life, size doesn't matter. Results do. And Dora's results were written in the rubble of Sevastopol. Impressive craters, destroyed fortifications, and the complete failure to justify its enormous cost. The biggest gun in history fired its shots and disappeared into history, remembered not for what it accomplished, but for what it represented. The fatal flaw of Nazi Germany. The obsession with spectacle over substance. The belief that impressive meant effective. Sevastopol fell on July 4, 1942. The siege had lasted 250 days. Dora participated for 1 month. Conventional artillery, dive bombers, and infantry assault accomplished what the Supergun could not. The city fell not because of Dora, but despite it. That's the final verdict on Hitler's Supergun. It was big. It was impressive. It was terrifying. And it was completely, utterly useless.